How's it going, Blake? How are you, Quinn?
Doing well. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this community outreach meeting on February 17th for Fibonacci Farms, LLC. This is a proposed Tier 11 outdoor marijuana cultivator that's proposed to be located at 446 Country Club Road, Suite B in Greenfield, Massachusetts. So Blake's going to open this meeting with a few different things that we're regulatorily required to cover, and then we'll move into a public comment and question section. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Quinn. I apologize. I'm just responding to someone who said they were having an issue with the telephone number. So let me get that out there. Okay. Thank you all. I will try to get through this as quickly as possible to give you all the most time, again, to ask questions and voice concerns. So yeah, this is a proposed Tier 11 outdoor cultivation, Fibonacci Farms LLC. This would be for 446 Country Club Road, Suite B. The cultivation tier would be a Tier 11 as well. Again, 935 CMR 500.110 requires that this facility have full camera coverage anywhere there's plants. Has to be 1080p HD. Each frame of that must be freezable with an irremovable date, time, and location, where the camera is on the property. And these cameras will not be trained on anyone's property who's in a butter. This is only, again, on the site itself. For the approximately 5,000 or less, drying barn, curing barn with the vault, that'll have commercial grade locks. Full camera coverage, as I said, and then there will be a finished product storage vault that will be a limited access area, which is, as the name implies, only certain members of the entity's hierarchy can access it. And that will be in reinforced construction to avoid someone just sort of kicking a wall down or a door in to get to the cannabis. Similarly, the facility has to be off limits to minors. In this case, anyone under 21 is not allowed on the facility property ever. That would include a fire department, personnel or police officer who happen to be 20 or under. Their badge would not trump state law. You have to show that you're 21. And this is not a public-facing enterprise. The only people who would be allowed to enter are fire, police, local inspectors, state inspectors, or someone there with a valid business purpose. And similarly, the state seed to sale tracking platform, which is called Metric, METRC, tracks every single product that comes out of here. And I advise my clients to have a wholesale clause in their contract that says, if this particular number ends up in the hand of a minor, that would give my client the power to terminate the contract because that would be jeopardizing their license as well. The state has identified 29 areas of disproportionate impact. Where a cannabis operator, a licensee as an applicant, has to demonstrate a positive impact plan that has a goal, a program, and a metric to try to measure that. Frank DiGiacomo here, the single owner of Fibonacci Farms LLC, is intending to donate annually to the New England Veterans Alliance. That's a group that provides cannabis cultivation education, among some other things, to folks who live in one of those 29 areas of disproportionate impact. And then, the truly local positive impact will be through conversations with people who live in Greenfield. So where will charitable dollars do the most good? Where will volunteer hours do the most good? And that's intended to be an open dialogue. Frank doesn't want to come and say, I think this is what's best. It's really to listen and hear. And as I said, it's things like a turkey drive or a cleanup, or really things that would be looked on favorably by the community. The last thing before we open it back up to questions is information adequate to demonstrate that this will not constitute a nuisance, as that term is defined by law. The chief culprit of an outdoor cultivation is potentially the odor. The way that gets mitigated is through placement on the property. Obviously putting it right on a property line would be not very neighborly. So the intent is to keep it as central in the property as possible. As well as using some companion plantings on the periphery, native plants that have smells that would either compete or mask some of the cannabis odor. And the odors from outdoor cultivation really start to peak towards their maturity. And yeah, the state license, the local permit, the host community agreement, none of those are, a get out of jail free card. You can't just say, I have this license and permit, I can do whatever I want. No, not at all. So with that, I've covered every topic that's required, and let's get right back to the questions. Quinn, if you can start.
So I'm going to ask two questions from the chat, and then if your question wasn't asked, if you could just send it again in the chat. Some of them were covered already. So how would this affect home values, and is there compensation for homeowners who will have a loss of value?
Sure. So I can get you some studies by basically real estate bodies. What happens with cannabis facilities is it tends to have virtually no impact on property values. And I know that may be counterintuitive, but as I said, I'm happy to provide you those studies. I've also seen studies that show that there's potentially an uptick in property value. I don't think that would be directly, relating to a cultivation necessarily. But question 4, legalized adult use cannabis. So obviously the majority of Massachusetts citizens decided they wanted that plant, as an adult. So yeah, it should not have a negative impact, may have a positive impact. And the answer to your question about would you get compensated if your property value dropped? I don't know how that would get calculated, how you could assign a property value change to a particular operation. But that's not something that I've seen personally. I think that would probably have to be on the back of a lawsuit, saying you've diminished our property values, and then you'd have to, prove that in a numerical way. So yeah, as I said, I'm not aware of that happening, but that's certainly your right as a private citizen if you believe that has happened.
Greenfield resident.
Yes. So as someone who's local here, I know that we've had problems with odor in the past with farms further away. How can you guarantee the fact that the odors will not be present to anyone who lives in the surrounding area? And how far was that surrounding area that would or would not be affected be?
So yeah, the local permitting is where the tools of the municipality are to require certain things of this kind of operation. Similarly, the state says you can't be too stinky in essence. So there is scientific ways to measure odor. So the first step in identifying an odor problem is obviously someone saying, hey, I smell that. So what they have is a piece of equipment that samples particulate matter from the air, because smell is of course a molecule. They measure that, and then what they do is they have a panel, basically a blind panel of people with average senses of smell to set a baseline, and they have different samples of various smelly things, and cannabis gets sort of I'd call it the smell equivalent of the Richter scale. So I'm not an odor sort of scientist by any stretch, but there are measurements. So yeah, the host community agreement, I believe, has a provision that says, there's a complaint mechanism. If we have an odor, you have to mitigate it. The techniques, again, are primarily with companion plantings, with citing it.
That's a wetlands area, right? So companion planting and doing that would be tough to figure out what exact plant you could do.
Yeah, I'm a former conservation commissioner myself, so I know the Wetlands Protection Act very well. Yes, you'd have to stay within or outside of the BVW, bordering vegetative wetlands. So we have the wetlands delineations. We're very aware of the wetlands present on the property. So yeah, we would have to do for any work near one of those bordering vegetative wetlands. You go through the Conservation Commission process. And typically, that's usually for cutting a road or adding a bridge. But yeah, we would be mindful and have a dialogue with the Conservation Commission. There are a couple of different mechanisms, a notice of intent. There's a delineation that you can do to sort of set where the boundaries are. But what I'm picturing is, companion plantings directly on the fence line, on the perimeter, because that's obviously where the plants are.
Right. Okay. And the 3 meetings that we had tonight, was that for Suite A, Suite B, and Suite C? Is there 3 different entities meetings? So you're doing 3 buildings and all. So in one of the meetings, you had said that it was going to be about 7 acres. So we can say total, this would be about 21 total, like 7 times 3 different.
7 total.
7 total for the 3 suites combined. You're talking about 7 acres of being actually okay. Light, so light pollution, we are talking not being affected. I just drove by the property. It's pitch black. There's actually a couple deer in the field right now. So would that be black at this time, in
yeah,
5 years from now?
there may be for either safety reasons or security reasons, basically an overhead gooseneck light on the door of the various sort of barns that I'll describe them as, where the finished product ends up. Again, the sort of lighting on the perimeter of the fence will be motion activated. And there's ways to tune those so it's not every squirrel running by that would trigger that. And there's also, basically the power for a permit granting authority to put restrictions on what type of lighting may be used and sort of orientation of that.
Okay, is that self-policed by the property owner? That'd be hard to be policed.
No,
by...
it would be included as a legal obligation as a condition of a special permit.
Okay. All right, and the fencing, you said 6 to 8 feet tall. I just drove by, and that land is much lower than the grade of the road. So 6 to 8 feet. That deer was like at 6 to 8 feet wouldn't have done anything to where I saw that deer, and I can't imagine a marijuana plant being the size of a deer. So, you guys don't really know the sizing or the location of where this building or where these fences would be, because it would matter to how tall it would be.
Yeah, and again, as we get the plans to present, as an exhibit to a permit application, we have to have every answer to that. As I tried to emphasize earlier, this meeting itself is a state requirement, right? So this doesn't win us any points with local permitting. We have to answer all of those questions. I just don't have those answers today yet because we don't have the plans developed. But that will be, you'll receive a public notice of that hearing. And that is, subject to the zoning ordinance. They'll have rules about, setbacks and sort of spacing of the location on the lot. And as we discussed earlier, the wetlands sort of limits exactly where we can put this. So it's just
very wet.
Configuring where it will fit legally on the property.
Okay. All right. I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the Reeds.
Thank you. I just have a couple questions. I'll try to be brief. One of my main concerns is there's basically a blind corner where the very low underpass is. There's only one stop sign there. So my concern is with 3 entities being there and the increased flow of traffic, will there be any plan in place? Because people barely know how to stop and let someone through as it is now. So with the increased flow of traffic, that's my concern. Also, they don't take very good care of the roads around here in wintertime. So with the increased flow of traffic, I'm sure the town would have to upkeep these roads more, which would probably cause the taxpayers, to have their taxes increase. We already pay insane amount for this area. It's a very nice area. So I'm also wondering if there will be any effect on our property taxes because of this. And my other question, the smell keeps getting mentioned. You mentioned in the last meeting that there would be a contingency plan in place if, the extra plants you're planting don't end up working. There's lots of marijuana farms in this general area in Western Mass. They're extremely smelly. It's very windy around here. Some people grow plants in their backyards because it's legal, and it could be only 3 plants and you can smell it clear as day. So I'm just wondering what plans would be in place if the local plants failed to mask the smell.
Yeah, there's some technology you can employ. And again, this would be something that the permit granting authority, City of Greenfield, could impose. So typically, municipalities don't say, do every single bell and whistle, until they're just under the sun just because of economic feasibility. And so I'll just tell you what I'm aware of. I'm not saying this is necessarily the plan. But there's something, a technology that equates to, it's basically a ground level ozone generator. And what ozone does instead of like a Febreze, which sort of masks an odor, an ozone generator actually has the benefit of chemically breaking up the smell, molecules that make the smell. So if you've ever been outside and had a lightning strike, that smell right after the lightning strike, that's what ozone smells like. So it has its own smell. It kind of just, it's hard to describe it, but Yeah, that's been used. I've also seen, this is in more sort of densely, basically an outdoor grow right on top of another neighbor. They've used, it's sort of like a misting system. But yeah, I think the goal here is to be, unobtrusive, not stinky. And then, it's up to the municipality to say, what happens if there's a complaint? What happens, basically what time does the operator have to fix it? And then I think there would be, all the options under the sun to try to control that. The benefit, frankly, of it being outdoors is that it doesn't get concentrated. Where it's stored in the buildings for drying, curing, and storage before it's sold at wholesale, that building itself will have carbon filtration on it. So yeah, we don't yet know the full suite of tools that will be used or required to be used to control odor, but that's basically something we'll have to deal with at local permitting as well.
All right, a few more questions that were sent to me in the chat. It was mentioned that you had to be so many feet away from schools. What about daycares? Because there are daycares in the area.
Yeah, so the Cannabis Control Commission regulations dictate that the only buffer that's required at a state level is 500 feet or more from a public school K through 12. The city of Greenfield, I don't believe, had a buffer over and above that. I did the zoning check on this months ago, so I would have to refresh my memory. But yeah, whatever the city zoning ordinance says, I looked into and did the measurement with the GIS maps and determined that there wasn't a use that was too close. So yeah, daycares, it's not a buffer required by the state, and I don't believe it to be required by a Greenfield zoning ordinance either.
All right. From Ruthie, how will the facility impact traffic on Country Club Road, Barton Road, and Leyden Road?
So that actually, the earlier person who expressed the people's inability to stop at stop signs. One point that I didn't mention before is the state required host community agreement obligates each of these entities to give up to 3% of its gross revenues to the city of Greenfield to mitigate impacts that are reasonably related. So, typically cultivation doesn't require a traffic study. That's certainly within the power of the special permit granting authority to require one. But the point I'm making with that 3% of gross revenues is that if it's determined that, you need an extra stop sign or some, I don't know, paving project or something to mitigate any impacts that, a traffic increase might come here, those would be dollars from the entity that goes straight to Greenfield that Greenfield would have to spend to mitigate that problem. It's not just
that problem's that's complicated though, because that's a federal bridge. That's a railroad. So I don't know that is not regulated by Greenfield. So how would that be dealt with?
I mean, I don't have an answer to you because I don't know the exact physical location of this, but yeah, if there's problems from traffic that you can say this is different than before, Fibonacci Farms came to the table, that money, again, up to 3% gross revenues could be spent by the town. The precise way to mitigate that, I can't answer, but it would be, a significant amount of dollars to try to solve that problem. And yeah, that's baked into the statute. You as an applicant, you can't even be an applicant until you have a host community agreement with the city. And those dollars, again, up to 3% of gross revenues can be spent to mitigate any of the problems that are reasonably related.
Tamara C, did you have another question?
Yes, I do. I have a couple of questions more. Okay, sorry about that. So first of all, I wanted to know, how does Michael Salimo, is that who owns the property now?
No.
So is it still owned by Kosmeskis?
Yes, that sounds right. I looked at this lease a while ago. Yeah, so the three clients of mine are basically Country Club Ventures has a lease with the current property owner. They are not the current property owner, any of my three clients. And the suites B and C are subleasing from Country Club Ventures.
Okay, I guess I don't understand how that would work with chapter 61A and that program that it joined. But I guess the other question I had before I forget is, do you have or do you know of any of your facilities, like close to facilities that we could reach by phone and be able to drive by and see a location and see what their facilities look like and speak to the people around?
I'm sorry, is that to me as the attorney or Frank or?
For the
Whoever might
owner or whoever, just to know if there's more,
Okay.
if there's places that we can see and talk to people about
So, yeah.
that you guys own
Yeah.
or they own.
Yeah, these folks own cultivation in the state of Michigan, so that's not exactly convenient to you. I
No.
do have some tier 11 outdoor cultivators. What I could do is ask them, hey, would you be willing to show some folks around? I don't have the power to sort of order them to do that. I can
Right.
ask, and I'm certainly willing to. And you know, as I said earlier, for security purposes, you can't just come and take a tour of this facility. It's got to be for some valid reason. I would say, you know, seeing what it's like to judge, you know, what the impacts might be on you would be valid enough for the commission to allow it.
Right.
I'm happy to reach out to my outdoor cultivator clients and ask that. Off the top of my head, I've got one in Cheshire, one in Whately. I'm so bad with geography. I think that's in the general neck of the woods where
Right.
you are, but not.
Yeah.
What tier are those?
Do you know what tier those are and if they're
Tier
about the
11.
same? Tier 11, so they'll be about the same size and,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, that'd be great, especially.
Okay. Quinn, if you can just jot that down, and Tamara, if you wouldn't mind, just my email, I'll put it in the chat right now. If you just want to shoot me an email, I
Sure.
will follow up with that.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. I very much appreciate it. And was there, let me see. Oh, okay. Also, I know my sister and my nephew, they're both allergic. So they have allergies. They're like allergic to everything, all sorts of stuff. But anyways, they have really bad allergies. And now what,
They're being medicated.
I don't know what exactly what
They have to go for medication every week.
they do. I guess they go for medications for,
Weekly. In fact, they just got back from one, I think, yesterday afternoon. They have to do one on a weekly basis to try to build it up. But what happens to those people that are allergic to that? What are you saying for that? I mean, the people that now they've lived here all their lives, and I doesn't hear of, like, I don't know, 50 years or something like that.
I truthfully have never heard of a cannabis allergy so severe that, you know, being near a cultivation facility would have any impact. I have heard of a condition called cannabis hyperemesis syndrome. Some people who consume the plant, you know, via smoking, vaping, or eating, have, basically they get uncontrollable vomiting.
Yeah,
so
but that
that's
isn't
very,
her.
very rare, but that's only from consumption, not just living near
Well, I can guarantee it isn't her. She isn't using this stuff. So, but what would you might not have heard it. You're not a doctor, and but
not.
and so what would you say to that if someone has? How are they going to address this issue?
Yeah, so anything that comes from a property, leaves the property, and has any sort of harm to someone else, you know, that's sort of why lawsuits get filed, right?
Yeah, but
so-
the thing is, what I'm speaking of is that in this area right here, the wind constantly is blowing, come across there. They just spread manure on Leiden Road, and you smell it over here on Country Club Road, and it affects. Now, when this operation is directly across the road from us, directly. I mean, we're not talking 100 feet. It's much closer than that. All right. Now, with that in mind, how can you possibly say that it would not affect, when I know I've walked within 200 or 300 feet of someone that had a handful of plants that are illegal these days, and you could smell it further away than that. Now, and I don't mean just a mild little whiff, but very strong odor. Now, how can you possibly control? And I know outside ozone, I don't believe that's, I think I've heard of that inside, but I don't know how you do that outside very well anyway. But how would you possibly control that size of an operation and the odors coming off those plants? And don't tell me they only happens at at a certain week or something in the year, because it doesn't. It's all during that growing season. Once they're up at all, you can start smelling it and smelling it very richly. What do you?
Yeah, I mean, the odor control strategies I've outlined, companion plants that are native, that have, a sort of universally recognized pleasing odor. There is the ability to do, misting. There's the ability to do, obviously planting where on the property. And if memory serves, I think it's about a 30-something acre lot. Obviously not all of it's buildable because of the wetlands, but yeah, trying to space it. So it's not, again, right on top of anyone. That's another mechanism. And all of this, I don't have every answer for you, because again, this is the first of many meetings. So when we present to the planning board or the zoning board of appeals, I can't remember which one off the top of my head, all of these answers will be, submitted in writing. They'll be part of our plans. And then the special permit granting authority would have the power to say, in response to a neighbor's concern, we want you to do X, Y, or Z. So I just don't know the full list of what that strategy will be yet, because the plan isn't all the way developed. And I had someone reach out to me via email before the meeting and say, is this a done deal? Is this meeting just for show? And the answer is no. This is not a done deal. We have to demonstrate that we comply with the zoning ordinance. We have to satisfy the state standards, which again include a prohibition on odors, becoming a nuisance. So that,
well, I'm not a pitcher, and I could probably throw a stone from my house to halfway across where your thing is, and then maybe further. And to get to the other side, if I stand on the roadside, I might even be able to make it to that. So we're not talking, and all you have to do is you're looking at it. You've probably driven by it umpteen times, I suppose. But if not, at least you have it on a plan in front of you with a plot plan from the town of Greenfield or city of Greenfield. And you can see what the narrowness of that. And if you've got to stay within, and that's showing the whole thing with their wetlands. So if you narrow that down between Country Club Road with the buffer between the road and where your property starts, where your grow thing starts, you haven't very far to go from where we are standing here to that. I'm talking we're not talking a quarter mile. We're not talking, it's in feet.
So yeah, again, when someone comes to me and says, will this property work for this proposed use? What I do as an attorney is look to the zoning ordinance and the zoning map to see where this, the city has said this is allowed. So that's the, why we're having this conversation. The map and the zoning bylaw ordinance here say that this particular use is allowed here. So
well, that map, that's all well and good, but that map is showing the whole lot. It's not showing the wetlands part of where that tree line is basically the end of where that can be done, anything could be done. So now we're coming very close to the residents that are on the other side of that street. And then the power lines are right down the street where they have a big right of way. So we know where it's in the north end of the lot that he's doing, because I'm sure he doesn't want it by his house. So with that in mind, though, there's no way that, I mean, you're talking about an 8-foot fence or something like this, or putting some arborvitaes. I don't know what you're talking about, but anybody doesn't need they haven't got to be a genius to figure out what's going to happen here. The wind constantly blows, and that stuff is going to be in my windows. And if you put a misting system up, that mist would probably land on my house, for God's sakes. It's so, I mean, that's how it gets. So I don't know. I don't think you got some answers here to come up with here.
Well, thank you for your questions and your concerns.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to catch up on some of the questions I've gotten through the chat messages. There's some comments in there too, but I'm just going to ask the questions so we can get through those, because I know everyone can see the other messages. So first, do you know an example of another outdoor grow facility that's in a residential neighborhood specifically?
I do not have a memory of the zoning checks I have done. Obviously, every town has its own map. So yeah, it depends. in response to the earlier question about trying to get sort of a visit to one of my other tier 11 outdoor grows, I can take a look. I don't know that answer off the top of my head.
From Sarah, is there any benefit to the homeowners of the surrounding area with this project?
Again, it's a state legal enterprise. The city of Greenfield has opted to allow this particular use, on this parcel. So the direct benefit to a neighbor, I'm not sure. And I guess my question would be, would you ask that if it was a pig farm? I don't know. There's a 3% community impact fee that can be used to offset impacts. So that are reasonably related. So if the neighbors, identify something that the facility is, responsible for, then there's sort of baked in dollars that go to the city that are earmarked to be spent to mitigate those things. I don't think that would be, as direct as a payment to a neighbor. But yeah, I mean, again, to get the permit, we have to demonstrate that we meet the standards of, the zoning act and the zoning ordinance. And part of that has to do with demonstrating, that in accordance with the zoning, that this use is not more detrimental than some other use that might go there. And as I mentioned earlier, the sort of unique regulatory and legal treatment of cannabis. If this were a proposed hemp farm, there wouldn't be any of these conversations. There wouldn't be any of these requirements because that is legally agriculture. So I hope I answered that. I've never honestly been asked that before. So it's the best I can do there.
What happens to the facility if the business isn't successful? What considerations are made for what to do with the building if it closes?
Sure. So the state's Cannabis Control Commission requires a wind down bond equal to the amount, a minimum amount of the annual licensing fee, which for a tier 11 is $50,000. I think the sort of biggest cleanup if this facility were to shut down at the end would be, obviously removing the cannabis plants from the field and removing, parts of the building where cannabis were stored for the drying, curing, and vault, as well as I believe there was that was addressed in the host community agreement with these three entities as well.
There's some concerns from Kim JB about ozone generators and their safety. And she would like to know if they're safe in an outdoor setting for families that live nearby.
Yeah, it's very, very localized. They're called ground level ozone generators because it really does sit pretty close to ground level. So you wouldn't turn it on and then stand right next to it. But these wouldn't be, every sort of post of a fence. They'd be spaced out to try to, again, break up those smell molecules. But yeah, these are used in indoor settings and I haven't heard tales of anyone dying from it. So yeah, ozone, sort of detrimental stuff from ozone is in significantly higher concentrations. That kind of injury to lungs would happen if you were in, basically a small closet and had the ozone, sort of pumping out without any ventilation.
From the Reeds, do you have any thoughts for traffic issues or effects on taxes?
For traffic, yeah, that would be a function of the local permitting. So yeah, traffic is always addressed regardless of the development project. You say, what's the estimate? The permit granting authority may require a traffic study. I typically see that for retail uses only for cannabis, just because that's the one where the most cars come. The staffing levels of this entity, are going to be pretty comparable all around. Sort of 5 full-timers, and then I believe during sort of harvest season it might beef up to around 10 or 15. So a grand total of maybe 45 people. Which I get that it's rural and bucolic, but any sort of traffic issues that might come with that, that could be addressable through a community impact fee. It could be addressed via a special condition on a special permit. It's just something that we have to develop and demonstrate that there's a way to deal with it. But yeah, the majority of vehicles coming to the site will come in the morning, work for the day, and go home. Any sort of pickup or delivery of things needed to run the facilities, are going to happen in again smaller sort of sprinter vans. There really isn't any plan except for some initial construction to have any major sort of heavy truck presence here. There's a limit to the size of vehicles that licensed transporters have in this state. And I've never seen one, again, bigger than a Sprinter van. And just picture, your average plumber, electrician van. These aren't monsters. And then the other question was about taxes. I'm not sure how to answer that. This won't, have a direct bearing on your taxes. It will add, significant tax revenue to the city, as well as that 3% impact fee, which is another sort of stream of revenue here. But I am not a tax expert. So I don't know how to answer that other than that way.
Will there be processing or only cultivating?
Cultivation only.
What is the estimate of 3%?
Pardon?
What is the estimate of 3% of the business? You guys must have a business proposal. What are you expecting that 3% to be?
Frank, I don't know if you've got the numbers on the top of your head. Outdoor plants typically sell significantly less money than an indoor plant because, again, most people take that outdoor harvest and use it in a manufacturing process via some other license. I would say on a per pound basis, an outdoor plant is probably going to be close to $2,000 a pound. I just am not a cultivator myself, so I don't really know the total number they expect.
Like, that's wrong.
Okay.
We're estimating that by the time we actually have a harvest, that it'll be down to about $500 a pound.
Okay.
And because you're looking at biomass, and so it wouldn't be smokable used flower, lower THC. So you're looking, let's say 2,000 or 2,000 plants times, let's see, let's say on average 3 pounds a plant, 6,000 times 500. That's net. So it's $3 million on gross. So our 3% is on
90,000.
Yeah, 90,000.
I would have expected it to be much higher than that. So as a community, we can see a $90,000 being, this should change. Okay. That's what thank you.
Nancy and Fred, you had another question.
I don't know if there's a way you can unmute for them, Quinn, but
Yeah, it gives them a pop-up. There you go.
Hello, we got it.
That's that's a conservative number though.
Can you hear me?
Quinn? Yep,
Can
we
you
can
hear
hear you.
Oh, okay,
Good,
all right.
thank you.
So I was wondering about the suite A, B, and C. So when you're talking about having 5 employees, is that for 5 employees for A, 5 employees for B, 5 employees for C? So you're talking really 15 employees for each. That would be total for A, B, and C.
yeah, those would be the year-round employees. And Frank, I don't know if you want to chime in terms of the seasonal labor that you anticipate.
Yeah, that would be year round. I would venture to say there'd be less year round than that, maybe 2 to 4. So if you want to say 3, but then during harvest season, we're going to bump it up potentially to maybe a total of 20 across the board. We're actually looking into some automation, some machinery that will allow us to cut down the labor as well. So,
and then when you're talking the 3 different entities, A, B, and C, are you using, are you going to have separate roads for each of those?
Yeah, so they'll be physically separated and legally separated. So yeah, they'll be, they're going to be very close to each other, obviously, to try to minimize the footprint on the property itself. But yeah, one employee won't get to go into the other entities, buildings or grow area. It's tied to the license, which would be tied, to the sub property. And the A, B, and C is so they can get their mail to the right entity.
So you'd have 3 different buildings then,
Correct.
okay?
3 separate curb cuts?
No, it'll be a shared driveway.
Okay. And then just the last thing that I'd write, people mentioned earlier, but I just wanted to reiterate the fact that this is a residential area, even though obviously you're thinking that you can use that property to grow the marijuana, but it's on the Franklin County Bikeway, that Country Club Road is. There's walkers, bikers, runners, strollers with babies. There's no sidewalks. So it is a big concern for all of us. And I think going forward, just so you know, this is going to be something that is going to be brought up a lot. So you're going to have to prepare for the fact that a lot of us are not going to let that go. So just so you
Absolutely. And I may not have emphasized this at the beginning, but all I do is represent cannabis businesses throughout the state. So certainly, many people have, been vehemently opposed, and really the commitment is to follow the state rules, abide by the permit granting authority special conditions. What I would just say is of course, in democracy, sometimes things happen that people in the minority don't like. And whether you had a particular opinion about cannabis in general, I understand that this, changes the way you think about it, because this is being proposed, right where you live. So we are sensitive to that. That is precisely why the state requires this meeting. And as I said, this meeting doesn't earn them any points one way or the other, except to satisfy a state requirement. We still have to demonstrate that we comply with the zoning ordinance, and the permit granting authority does have the power to put guardrails on what we can and can't do. So wanting to do it and what you're permitted to do, don't always sort of meet. But yes, you will get notice of any public hearings before a permit granting authority. And then absolutely, these types of concerns are, we welcome them. And the, City of Greenfield has a legal obligation to, listen and make sure that what we're proposing comports exactly with the law. Just the final point I would make is, again, when we look at the zoning map, we didn't draw the zoning map. We can only say that's where this municipality, City of Greenfield, allows this type of use. And yeah, the map is what it is, and that's why we took the time, effort and expense to propose this. But yeah, this is the opening conversation of a much longer dialogue.
Thank you. Another question from Tamara C. I think just clarification on the employment. Would it be 45 people for all 3-tier buildings, or per each building for the seasonal employees, I believe?
Total, I think, is the top end.
Yeah, and 45 is high, way high.
All right. And then a question from Kim JB. How will employees make it out to the buildings that are in the middle of a field in the middle of winter? There isn't a road in the middle of the property. Will they be on snowshoes?
There won't be any growing in the winter.
Yeah, we will be shut down. We are a seasonal business.
All right, Greenfield resident, did you have another question, or was your hand still up?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. No.
So that's all of the questions that I have queued up right now. Are there any more questions? You can send them in the chat right now, or you can just speak up if you'd like to ask any last questions before we conclude for tonight.
Yeah, and
question from Nancy and Fred. What is the grow season?
Grow season starts in May, and we harvest in September. Start harvesting in September, and we will be cleaned up by, ideally, we'd like to be done and closed down by November.
Thanks. Can you speak about the odor of fertilizers used?
Sure, yeah. So we're actually, regarding pesticides and fertilizers, we're not allowed to use any pesticides. Fertilizers, we use salt-based, so the odors don't really, it's not as bad as you would think, and it's mixed into our irrigation lines. The odors also from the plants, I have experience in Michigan doing upwards of 15,000 plants, running 2 different grows out in Michigan. They with a total of 200 acres. And if you space them properly and do the correct thing, the odor, it's not like an indoor grow where they are pumping the odor out of these buildings in a condensed form. So that condensed form then has the ability to travel. You have constant aeration from the plants if you do the proper spacing. And you guys mentioned a lot of wind. Wind actually will help in keeping the plants healthy, and mitigating that smell. So I just wanted to put my 2 cents in regarding that.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
And Quinn and I obviously had the same instinct. I'm available via email for any additional questions that might come up later, or if you just didn't feel comfortable asking them in this setting. I'll do my best to answer them as quickly as possible. Any sort of operational question that relies on cultivation knowledge, I would defer to my respective clients. But yeah, we want to be available. We want to be good neighbors, and we really do appreciate the level of interest. And as I said, there will be many other opportunities to voice your concerns and have questions answered in a more detailed way. This is the first step of many, and as we get the plans more fully developed, that will be developed basically as a back and forth through that permitting process.
So Blake, I'm looking in the chat here. I see someone said the owner has a poor history of odor control. It's not just the plants. So they were farming hay, from my understanding, on the property previously. It's a much different process, growing cannabis plants. And then to close out the conversation as well, like Blake said, we will strive to be a good neighbor. Our plans with the engineer and everything, we're really not looking to be an eyesore to you guys, and we will plan to put up the proper fence and then also have trees and whatnot that will grow up to the point where you just see a greenery. That's really our ideal situation, because we don't want to be an eyesore or bring any more attention to the facility. So it is in our best interest to be a good neighbor and to work with the community. So I just wanted to say that as well.
Thanks. We do have 2 more raised hands with some last questions. So iPhone Jen Styles.
Yeah, so the gentleman that was just speaking, is he the grower?
No, man.
The owner.
He's the owner.
Yeah. So we
you
hire
live,
growers.
so you live here.
No, I do not live there.
Okay. So I would love for you to come down here in the springtime and in the summertime when this is going to be growing this summer, just so you can see what we have to deal with down here with the smell of the manure that they spread on the farm.
That
That
won't happen this year.
Ooh.
The manure won't happen.
The manure will happen.
No, it
Not
won't
on that-
happen on that land this year.
Not on that land,
Right.
but on the other land. Okay. So it travels. So it's just not that piece of land that the manure is spread on.
Okay.
It's spread on the field behind it as well. So, and it is horrible. Okay. It's like has to be the worst smell ever that you can ever smell in your life. And it disrupts your life because you can't open your windows. You can't eat outside. It's horrible. It's the quality of life that goes downhill in the summertime here. And we have a beautiful area out here. It's relaxing, welcoming, and then we have to smell that. So then now, on top of that, we will now be smelling what you're going to be planting.
So the one point I would make there, sorry to interrupt, is just that unlike the manure spreading, there's nothing you can do to stop that manure spreading, right? Because it's
yes, we can, because we've complained to the town about it. So whether you're only allowed to spread it during certain times of the day, and the winds have to be moving in certain directions for them to spray it, because it's not cow manure, it's human waste manure.
Yeah, the point I was making is just that if this facility or facilities cause an odor, there are consequences that come from not addressing it, right? And you've emphasized that, the odor from the manure is a problem, but it sounds like it persists. So here the stakes are different, right? To get a cannabis operation open is incredibly lengthy and expensive. So to lose a license for being essentially too stinky is sort of business insanity. So, these fine folks will do what they can to make sure it's not adding to that sort of, like you said, diminishment of quality of life during the summer. And the difference is the consequences for them are much bigger than the consequences based on the crop value than whatever the other farms are spreading the manure for. So it's just a much higher stake, and there's no incentive to get it, let it get to that point at all. It would be crazy to spend the money and time to then be shut down because you can't, make things right.
Okay, so my next question is what's the time frame? Like, when are we expecting these buildings to be built and the plants to be planted?
We intend to apply for the local permits in the next month or two. Again, we're waiting for the drawings to be finalized so we can have a compliant submission. With the Cannabis Control Commission, I would expect a provisional license probably in the neighborhood of about 4 months from the date we submit. We'll be eligible to submit basically at the conclusion of these meetings. That's a state license that has nothing to do with the local process. So yeah, if all goes well, opening sort of day final license would come right around that May timeframe. So there would be the chance to have a grow season in 2023. We'll see. The state is slow, but yeah, that's a pretty good outline of the timeline.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Barb Wozniak. And then if you have any other questions, raise your hand. Barb, are you there?
Sorry about that.
No worries. Go ahead.
Yeah, one of my concerns is regarding the property values. I'm wondering if there has been a similar facility built near a residential neighborhood, and if so, how were those property values affected? I mean, we're all concerned, I'm sure, about the property of our homes being lessened due to having such a facility nearby.
Yeah, I mentioned this a little earlier, and
Yeah, I didn't catch it. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, no worries. So I will be able to supply you the studies I referenced. These are sort of surveys done by national real estate companies. So it's not going to be super localized to Greenfield, but the data has shown that cannabis facilities of basically any type don't tend to have any negative impacts on property values, and the studies and the numbers show that actually property values increase slightly. That is usually through the lens of a slightly different use. But yeah, I don't want to give you an answer to a question that I don't know with 100% certainty, but I'll be happy to share those studies that I referenced. I can't remember the names of them right off the top of my head, but these are, it's not like it's coming from, High Times or something. These are real estate analysts, not any sort of industry-backed study. It's just an analysis of the numbers of property values near cannabis facilities. So yeah, I'm happy to provide that. Again, my email's in the chat. I'll put it in there once again. And if anyone wants to email me anything I mentioned, I'm happy to supply. And yeah, we can get you those answers.
And the other thing is, it goes back to what the other fellow said about the growing season. We've lived here for 49 years and we love this open air. And I guess I'm concerned about, am I going to go out from your growing season of May till September, which is the bulk of the time that we spend in our yards? And are we going to go out every day and say, oh, marijuana? I mean,
I don't
we
believe.
have that
From my
here.
experience, from my experiences in Michigan, no, you will not.
Well, okay, just a concern that I have. Also, in the previous question that we had, I don't know that we caught your answer as to how far back from the road any fences might be set. I mean, they're not going to be right on top of the road, so you have your road and
Yeah.
the fence right there.
So the placement of all the buildings will be part of the special permit process. So there are, setback requirements under the zoning ordinance. And essentially, when you apply for a permit, you say, here's, our wish list. This is where we'd really like everything to happen. Very few, submissions on an application basis end up exactly the way it was submitted. So concerns like that, sightlines, visibilities, what sort of a building looks like, what the fence looks like, and where it is. That's in the power of the local permit granting authority to say, do this, don't do that. So yeah, I don't want to give you an answer yet because I don't know that the plans haven't been developed, but that would all be public record. You would all get notice of that. Anyone who's on this Zoom meeting who got the mailer would get that same notice. And then that public hearing gets advertised in probably the Greenfield Recorder as well. So yeah, you'll have more opportunities to voice that exact concern, and frankly, the answer that would be better for you to hear will be exactly what Greenfield would allow or require these entities to do to make sure it complies with zoning.
Okay, and then the last comment or thought would be that I'm just curious. I know this is the targeted property. I think that's how you put it. Was the project even considered to be looked in a less residential neighborhood that would be not so impactful to all of us? I mean, there's a lot of property in this town.
Yes, so basically, it's a function of what's available to rent, and the map is limited. So any property that you see might be possible doesn't necessarily mean it is. So the zoning ordinance says this is allowed here, but not there. So yeah, I truthfully don't know how many properties were investigated in Greenfield, but it does comport with the zoning regulations. And that zoning ordinance and the zoning map were set by the city of Greenfield. And every one of my clients has to abide by that. So certainly I've had plenty of neighbors over the years here say, why would you do it this way? And the answer is, well, we didn't create the map. We only can go where the city says we can go.
Right. Okay. Thank you. All
Absolutely.
right. I'll let someone else speak. Thank you
for
for your time.
questions.
Thank you, Barb. Greenfield resident, do you have another question? It looks like we have 3 final ones.
Yes. 3 suites, will they all be registered as Massachusetts or green? As for the community, I just want to make sure taxes are going to come back to our community. So we're seeing the 3% that we make. Property values, obviously, for this property, is this all these businesses? Are these companies registered in Massachusetts or in Greenfield? Is, let's say, Suite A makes a bunch of money and Suite B and C don't make any money or at a loss. Where are they all registered? For income reasons.
We'll keep this stuff.
To hold a license in Massachusetts, you must be a Massachusetts entity. So yeah, these are all registered with the Secretary of the Commonwealth. You're certainly welcome to check that yourself, but yeah. And then in terms of local taxation, the lease, obviously the property owner pays the taxes, and then that gets sort of passed on to the tenant. I do recall that one of the mayor's conditions in the host community agreement was that any vehicles used, sort of company vehicles, that they get registered in Greenfield, so the excise tax goes back. So yeah.
So you've been in communication a lot with the mayor to get to that point. Okay, cool. That's interesting to know. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
All right, iPhone Jen Styles.
I have another question. Thank you. So if this is leased property, how long is the lease good for?
I frankly don't remember. Frank, do you know that off the top of your head?
Don't. Give me a second. I believe it's a 5-year lease and then with the option to renew.
Okay. And then what happens, like, what are the provisions if the owner decides to sell the property or he passes away or anything like that? So what has been established for that?
So basically, when a property owner sells property with a lease on it, the new purchaser buys the lease. That wouldn't obligate a new purchaser to, renew it. But yeah, I mean, just imagine buying an apartment building, right? You can buy everyone out of their lease and kick them out and get your own tenants. It would be the same thing here. The owner would have the power to buy, the tenants out. I would imagine the dollar figure to buy them out would be prohibitively expensive. But yeah, there's no obligation for a new owner to renew if they didn't want it.
Okay, and then what happens after their lease expires and they decide not to continue with the business?
That's when the state's mandatory wind down bond
Okay.
comes into play. So they have to deconstruct, remove any cannabis from the property. And then it would be up to the private landowner to say, I don't want that fence anymore. Or I don't want, the building.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you. We have one final question from the chat. I believe I was told the owners live in another state. Is that not correct? It seems like the money made won't be staying in our community.
The owners live in another state, yes, but that's the United States of America. Owners are allowed to live wherever they want. So the answer to that is just, it's the state of the law as we have it today.
We will be employing local help and staff though,
Absolutely.
including security. We're looking to be in talks with I believe the ex police chief. And that's the route we're going there with our security. And yeah, all local staff for sure.
And I believe there was even a local hiring preference to the extent that's legally sort of mandatable in the host community agreement, each of the three.
All right, thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions at the moment, but I'll give you just a minute if you want to raise your hand. If you want to type in any last questions before we conclude for the night, now's the time. All right, so not seeing any, I'm going to conclude this community outreach meeting. Thank you very much for everyone who came out. It was a very good conversation.
Thanks, everyone. And again, you'll have the chance to have your concerns addressed more completely at the local permitting process. And we look forward to hearing those and doing everything we can to address them. Thanks, everyone.